Corvani researcher's third arm twitched as she adjusted the holographic display for the 14th time. Professor Velk had presented findings on 17 different species conflict resolution patterns, but none had generated quite this level of academic anxiety. The mixed species audience at the Andorian Institute for Xenopsychological Studies shifted in their various seating configurations, mandibles clicking and breathing apparatus whirring with nervous energy. "The subject," Velk began, her voice carrying that particular academic dryness that suggested she'd rather be cataloguing mineral deposits than explaining why everyone in the room was suddenly reconsidering their insurance policies, was designated as a low-threat research academic. Standard psychological profile indicated minimal aggressive tendencies. A Threxian delegate raised two of his forearms. Define minimal in this context. No recorded violent incidents. No military training. Her conflict resolution score ranked in the bottom 12 percentile for her species. Velk's mandibles clicked with what might have been the Corvani equivalent of a grimace. She taught geology at a minor research facility. The holographic display shifted to show security footage from what appeared to be an unremarkable corridor aboard a cargo station. The figure at the center of the frame looked deceptively ordinary. Bipedal, wearing the sort of practical clothing that marked her as someone who spent more time around rock samples than people. Professor Zenth moved with the unhurried gait of someone completely comfortable in artificial gravity, her graying hair pulled back in a style that prioritized function over fashion. "The initial incident occurred during routine sample transport," Velk continued. 3 Zelkari pirates, Grix, Nox, and their unnamed technical specialist intercepted the subject during what they believed was a standard robbery opportunity. The footage flickered to a different angle. Zelkari were textbook opportunistic criminals. Scales dulled from cheap life support modifications, equipment cobbled together from scavenged parts, and the sort of casual arrogance that came from preying on soft academic targets for 3 decades without consequence. "Show them the sample," called out Dr. Helix, a cybernetic enhancement specialist whose interest in the case stemmed from purely professional curiosity about how organic brains processed revenge calculations. The display zoomed in on a small crystalline formation clutched in Zenth's left hand. Even through the grainy security feed, it sparkled with an inner light that suggested either significant monetary value or serious scientific importance, possibly both. The subject refused to surrender the specimen, Velk noted with the tone of someone reading a particularly dull shipping manifest. Standard negotiation protocols were attempted. "By standard negotiation protocols, you mean they threatened her?" Dr. Helix observed. "Correct. The subject's response was to increase her grip on the sample and suggest the pirates engage in several anatomically impossible activities." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the audience. Even among species that didn't share human reproductive biology, the universal nature of creative insults transcended cultural barriers. The security footage jumped forward. Now Grix held a plasma cutter, its blue glow reflecting off his scales in patterns that suggested he'd done this sort of thing before. The conversation was brief, conducted in the sort of interspecies pidgin that developed around commercial shipping lanes. "You give, we take. Simple. Simple for you, maybe. I spent 4 years digging this out of a collapsed mine shaft, while dodging unstable support beams and toxic gas pockets. Find your own rocks." Nox stepped closer, probably intending intimidation. "Give willing, or we take unwilling." Zenth's response was delivered with the flat affect of someone explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow student. "The sample is embedded in synthetic skin. Removal requires precision instruments and approximately 40 minutes of careful extraction. Unless you have surgical experience, attempting forcible removal will destroy both the specimen and significant portions of my hand." The pirates exchanged glances. In retrospect, they should have been their first warning about human psychological architecture. Most species, when faced with the choice between losing a valuable object and losing a body part, made the logical decision. Humans, as the galaxy was slowly learning, had a different relationship with logic. "They proceeded with forcible extraction," Velk announced, as if describing the weather on a moderately cloudy day. The footage became difficult to watch. Not because of graphic violence, the plasma cutter was precise enough to cauterize as it cut, but because of the expression on Zenth's face. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She watched the entire process with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment, occasionally offering helpful suggestions about angle and depth. "Bit deeper on the left side there, you're going to nick the container seal otherwise." When it was over, she flexed her remaining fingers experimentally, studying the stump where her ring finger had been with professional curiosity. "Interesting. The nerve cluster damage is more extensive than I calculated." The pirates departed with their prize, leaving Zenth to file a standard insurance claim and arrange for basic medical treatment. The entire incident should have concluded with a minor footnote in cargo station security logs. The subject's initial response followed predictable patterns, Velk continued. Medical treatment, incident report, standard insurance documentation, all thoroughly unremarkable. "But," prompted Dr. Helix, who had clearly reviewed this material before, "but approximately 72 hours post-incident, the subject's behavior pattern underwent what can only be described as a fundamental restructuring. The holographic display shifted to show communication logs, financial transactions, and travel records. Even to academics unfamiliar with human psychology, the pattern was unmistakable. Someone who had spent 30 years teaching mineral composition to bored undergraduates had suddenly developed interests in weapons procurement, mercenary hiring practices, and the sort of detailed intelligence gathering that suggested long-term strategic planning. She started learning, observed an Exari philosopher, whose species had developed 7 different academic disciplines devoted to studying revenge as an art form. "Learning implies casual interest," Velk corrected. The subject engaged in what appears to be comprehensive tactical education. Her data consumption increased by 400%. Her financial transactions suggest procurement of specialized equipment far beyond her previous spending patterns. The display showed a sampling of her research topics: small unit tactics, psychological warfare techniques, Zelkari cultural weaknesses, shipping lane traffic patterns, and, perhaps most ominously, detailed studies of how various species experienced fear. A Trilaxian delegate leaned forward, his sensory tendrils practically vibrating with academic excitement. "Classic human escalation pattern. Initial injury assessment, followed by proportional response calculation." "Proportional," repeated Dr. Helix, with a sort of skeptical inflection that suggested he'd seen the final outcome data. Velk's display shifted one final time, showing a timeline that stretched from the initial theft to present day. The past 3 months were marked with a steadily accelerating series of incidents. Zelkari operations disrupted, associates questioned, safe houses discovered and abandoned. The pattern painted a picture of someone conducting a systematic dismantling of an entire criminal network with the methodical patience of a geological survey. "The concerning element," Velk noted with characteristic understatement, "is that the subject's response appears to be ongoing." The conference room fell silent, except for the ambient hum of life support systems and the nervous clicking of various species' anxiety responses. Everyone present understood the implications. If humans responded to minor theft, With this level of organized retaliation, what did that suggest about their approach to more serious conflicts? "Where is she now?" asked the Trilaxian delegate. Velk's third arm gestured toward the conference room's main viewport, beyond which lay the shipping lanes of the Kepler Junction, one of the galaxy's busiest commercial crossroads and, not coincidentally, the last known location of the Zelkari pirates who had made the mistake of cutting off a geology professor's finger. "According to our most recent intelligence," Velk said, with the tone of someone delivering news about an incoming asteroid strike, "Professor Zenth arrived in this system approximately 6 hours ago." The academic anxiety in the room shifted into something approaching panic. Outside the viewport, normal commercial traffic continued its predictable patterns, unaware that somewhere among those routine cargo runs and passenger transports, a middle-aged geology professor was putting the finishing touches on what appeared to be a remarkably thorough education in applied vengeance. "Perhaps," suggested Dr. Helix with the careful optimism of someone hoping to be wrong, "she's simply here for research purposes, academic conference, mineral surveys, that sort of thing." Velk's mandibles clicked once, a sound that, in Corvani body language, roughly translated to, "And perhaps plasma cutters are used for decorative food preparation." The display showed one final piece of data: Professor Zenth's recent equipment purchases cross-referenced with local shipping manifests, military-grade personal shields, high-energy portable weapons, and, most tellingly, a detailed schematic of the Zelkari vessel currently docked at Bay 47. Someone in the audience muttered something about academic research taking interesting directions these days. Outside the viewport, the steady flow of interstellar commerce continued, blissfully unaware that the galaxy's understanding of human psychology was about to undergo significant revision. Grix had developed what the medical databases politely termed chronic hypervigilance disorder, though his crewmates preferred the more descriptive jumping at shadows like a startled vegan tree cat. The Zelkari pirate captain sat hunched over his personal communication array, third cup of stimulant brew growing cold, while he monitored intelligence feeds with the obsessive attention of someone who'd recently discovered that academic revenge came with a remarkably comprehensive skill set. "Still nothing from the Nexus cluster operation," reported Ket, his newest lieutenant. The young Zelkari scales still held their natural luster, unmarked by the stress patterns that had begun mottling Grix's hide over the past weeks. Zan's crew missed their scheduled check-in 47 hours ago. Grix's claws scraped against the console surface. Zan's operation had been solid. 3 decades of successful cargo interception, clean getaways, satisfied buyers, the sort of professional criminal enterprise that didn't simply vanish into the void without explanation. "Equipment failure," Ket suggested with the optimism of youth. "Maybe communication array problems, or they're running silent to avoid patrol sweeps." "Equipment failure," Grix repeated, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who'd watched too many coincidences accumulate. "Right. Just like Torex's navigation malfunction that landed his ship in the middle of a military training exercise. And Vex's cargo bay explosion that somehow left everything except the crew quarters intact." The ship's intercom crackled with Nox's voice from the engineering deck. "Captain, we've got another transmission, same encryption pattern as the others." Grix's stomach performed what felt like a complete inversion. The transmissions had started 3 weeks ago, untraceable, expertly encrypted, and containing information that suggested someone had developed an uncomfortably detailed understanding of their operational structure, routes, contacts, safe houses, the sort of intelligence that took years to accumulate and could destroy decades of careful criminal networking in a matter of days. "Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was pleasantly conversational, carrying the slight accent that marked its owner as someone from the inner colony worlds, Someone who'd grown up around universities and research facilities, not the rough commercial sectors where pirates learned their trade. "Hello again, Grix. I trust you received my previous communications regarding the unfortunate fate of your colleagues in the Antares sector. I thought you might be interested to know that I've recently expanded my research to include your operations in the Vega system." Ket's scales shifted to a sickly yellow-green. "Who is that?" Grix gestured for silence. On the display screen, tactical data began streaming. Shipping routes, crew rotations, financial records, and most disturbing of all, detailed psychological profiles of every pirate in their network. The sort of comprehensive intelligence package that military organizations spent months compiling. "Your friend Dex was remarkably cooperative once we established proper communication protocols," the voice continued with academic politeness. "He provided fascinating insights into your recruitment methods, operational preferences, and personal habits. Did you know that you consume approximately 2.7 times the normal Zelkari caffeine intake? Stress, I assume." The transmission included video footage from inside Dex' safe house, or what remained of it. Furniture arranged with surgical precision, walls decorated with detailed charts showing the interconnections between various criminal operations, and in the center of it all, Dex himself sitting in what appeared to be perfectly comfortable restraints while discussing 30 years of piracy with someone whose voice remained calmly professional throughout the interrogation. "Academic research," Knox muttered from the doorway, having apparently abandoned his engineering duties to witness their ongoing psychological dismantling. "She's treating us like a research project." "The fascinating aspect," the transmission continued, "is how efficiently criminal networks can be disrupted through targeted application of their own methodologies. Fear, you see, is remarkably contagious among species that rely on reputation for operational security." Ed's youth provided him with a certain clarity that experience sometimes obscured. "She's not trying to kill us, she's trying to break us." The display shifted to show shipping manifests, crew transfers, and financial transactions, all marked with subtle alterations that suggested someone had been methodically poisoning their professional relationships. Buyers suddenly cancelling long-standing contracts, safehouse operators refusing to renew leases, information brokers developing selective amnesia about previously reliable contacts. "The sample you removed from my person," the voice noted with the tone of someone discussing weather patterns, "contained geological survey data from 17 different worlds, including 3 that your network has used for equipment caches. I've taken the liberty of sharing this information with appropriate authorities, along with detailed analysis of your operational patterns." Grix's claws left deep scratches in the console surface. 17 worlds. 3 decades of carefully selected hiding places, backup supply routes, and emergency rendezvous points, all compromised by someone who'd spent 4 years digging rocks out of dangerous holes in the ground. "The irony," continued the transmission, "is that the specimen held purely scientific value. No rare elements, no commercial applications, nothing that justified the effort you expended in its acquisition. It was simply a curiosity, a mineral formation that contradicted several established theories about planetary core development." Knox laughed, though the sound held no humor. "We cut off her finger for a rock with no value." "Sentimental value," the voice corrected gently. "My research partner spent the last months of his life analyzing similar formations before the mining accident that claimed him. The sample represented completion of his theoretical work." The transmission paused, allowing this information to settle. In the silence, Grix could hear the ship's life support systems, the distant hum of the hyperdrive, and the increasingly rapid breathing of his crew as they processed the implications. "So you understand," the voice resumed, that your theft represented not merely financial loss, but the destruction of irreplaceable scientific legacy. This perhaps explains why my response has been somewhat more comprehensive than your previous victims' reactions. The display showed a real-time tactical map of the Kepler junction system, with their current position clearly marked. Surrounding them, highlighted in various colors, were the positions of what appeared to be a remarkably diverse collection of vessels. Cargo haulers, private security contractors, independent mercenaries, and several ships whose configurations suggested military backgrounds. My research into your operational methods proved quite educational, the voice noted, particularly the psychological techniques you employ to maintain crew loyalty through fear-based hierarchies. I've found that similar principles apply quite effectively when the roles are reversed. Pet's scales had shifted to full panic coloration. Captain, those ships, they're surrounding us. 17 vessels. Grips counted, his voice barely above a whisper. She hired 17 ships. Actually, the transmission corrected. I hired 3. The others volunteered after I shared documentation of your network's activities over the past decade. It seems that several merchant families have been waiting for an opportunity to express their dissatisfaction with your business practices. The tactical display updated to show movement vectors. Not an attack formation, something far more sophisticated. A containment pattern that would prevent escape while maintaining plausible civilian traffic cover. The sort of coordinated operation that required weeks of planning and extensive knowledge of local shipping patterns. The beauty of academic methodology, the voice continued, is its emphasis on thorough preparation and systematic execution. Unlike your typical smash-and-grab operations, I've had considerable time to study optimal approaches to conflict resolution. Mox moved to the weapons console, his movements sharp with desperation. Captain, we've got enough firepower to punch through. 17 ships, Grix repeated, staring at the tactical display. She turned our own victims against us. The transmission concluded with the sort of polite formality typically reserved for academic correspondence. I'll be arriving at your current position in approximately 4 hours. I suggest you use this time for reflection, perhaps meditation, or whatever spiritual practices your species employs when preparing for significant life transitions. Until then, I remain respectfully yours, in the pursuit of scientific knowledge, Professor Zen. The communication array fell silent, leaving the 3 pirates to contemplate their situation. Outside the viewport, the steady flow of commercial traffic continued, but now every vessel looked potentially hostile. Every routine cargo run possibly camouflaging military assets. Every peaceful merchant captain potentially harboring serious grievances against Zelkari piracy. Het broke the silence with the sort of question that highlighted the generational gap in criminal experience. What do we do now? Grix studied the tactical display, watching 17 hostile contacts maintain perfect containment formation while appearing to conduct routine business operations. Somewhere among those ships, a geology professor who'd spent 3 months learning to conduct military operations with academic precision was putting finishing touches on what appeared to be the most thoroughly researched revenge in galactic history. Now, he said, reaching for his emergency communication codes, we learn why experienced pirates don't steal from humans without doing proper background research first. The merchant vessel Probability's Edge drifted through the outer sensor perimeter of Kepler Junction with the lazy confidence of a ship whose cargo manifests matched its actual contents. A rarity in this sector that drew no special attention from traffic control. Captain Voss, a grizzled Alteran whose cybernetic eye replacements had seen 3 decades of questionable shipping arrangements, monitored the passive sensor sweeps with professional interest. Target vessel is maintaining position at Grid 77 Alpha, reported his tactical officer, a human whose background included several years of military service that officially never happened. No evasive maneuvers, no attempt to break containment. Probably figuring their options, Voss mused, though his tone suggested he didn't consider those options particularly promising. "What's our package doing?" From the ship's modified cargo bay came the sound of someone conducting what appeared to be equipment inventory, with the systematic precision of a quartermaster preparing for extended deployment. Professor Xenth had converted the space into something between a command center and an armory, complete with holographic displays showing real-time intelligence on Zelkari operations across 7 systems. "Finalizing target prioritization," came the reply through the intercom, delivered in the same conversational tone she might use to discuss rock classifications. "I'm debating whether to process them in order of operational seniority or personal culpability for previous crimes." The tactical officer, who'd introduced himself only as Reeves, and whose military bearing suggested special operations background, exchanged glances with Captain Voss. Neither man had expected academic revenge to involve quite this level of strategic planning. "Personal recommendation," Voss called back. "Stick with operational hierarchy. Sends clearer message to other criminal organizations." "Excellent point. Thank you." The holographic displays shifted to show detailed dossiers on each of the 3 pirates currently trapped in the containment formation. Psychological profiles, operational history, family connections, financial vulnerabilities, the sort of comprehensive intelligence package that typically required months of careful surveillance and significant resource investment. Reeves studied the data with professional appreciation. "Ma'am, where exactly did you acquire this level of tactical intelligence?" "University library system," came the cheerful reply, "combined with voluntary information sharing from approximately 47 individuals who'd suffered losses due to Zelkari criminal activities over the past decade. It's remarkable how cooperative people become when you approach them with proper academic credentials and a genuine research proposal." The communication array chimed with an incoming transmission, encoded with emergency priority codes that suggested someone was experiencing significant professional distress. Captain Voss accepted the connection, curious to hear what sort of desperate bargaining would emerge from cornered criminals. Grix's voice carried the strained politeness of someone attempting diplomacy while experiencing what medical professionals might diagnose as acute psychological breakdown. "Unknown vessels. This is Captain Grix of the independent trader Stellar Wanderer. We appear to have experienced some sort of navigational error and would appreciate assistance with course correction to the nearest commercial shipping lane." The silence that followed suggested everyone involved understood the fictional nature of this request. In the cargo bay, Professor X made a sound that might have been academic interest. "Fascinating. Stage 1 denial behavior, exactly as predicted by the literature on criminal psychology, under extreme stress." Reeves consulted his tactical display. 17 ships maintaining formation, no signs of communication between target vessel and any external contacts. "They're isolated." "As intended," Xenth replied. "Social isolation amplifies psychological pressure exponentially, particularly among species that rely on group dynamics for emotional stability." Captain Voss found himself wondering if universities offered courses in applied psychological warfare, or if geology professors simply developed these skills through natural academic evolution. Either possibility suggested some interesting revisions to his understanding of educational institutions. The communication array activated again, this time carrying Nox's voice with considerably less diplomatic composure. "Look, whoever you are, we can negotiate. financial compensation, territorial agreements, information trade, standard professional courtesy arrangements. From the cargo bay came the sound of someone consulting reference materials, actual physical books, based on the page-turning sounds. Professor Zenth appeared to be conducting this operation with the sort of scholarly thoroughness that involved extensive bibliography research. Stage 2 bargaining behavior, she announced. Though the offer of information trade suggests more sophisticated psychological adaptation than typical criminal responses. Interesting. Are you going to respond? Captain Voss asked. Eventually. Current psychological theory suggests optimal pressure maintenance requires periodic communication interspersed with strategic silence periods. We're still in the initial silence phase. Reeves checked his chronometer. How long does this phase last? Until target stress indicators reach predetermined thresholds. Based on biometric data from their ship's life support systems, I estimate another 17 minutes before optimal negotiation conditions are achieved. Captain Voss considered this information while watching the tactical display show 17 ships maintaining perfect formation around a single vessel, whose occupants were presumably discovering that academic methodology applied to personal vendettas operated on a rather different timeline than traditional criminal conflict resolution. The next transmission arrived precisely 17 minutes later, as predicted. Ket's voice carried the high-pitched stress markers of someone whose previous life experience hadn't included situations requiring this level of psychological resilience. Professor Zenth, we know you're listening. We're prepared to return your property and provide reasonable compensation for damages incurred. This time, Zenth activated the communication array herself. When she spoke, her voice carried the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to particularly slow students. I'm afraid you misunderstand the nature of our current academic exercise. This isn't a negotiation regarding property return. The sample you removed was destroyed during your extraction process, as I predicted at the time. This is a field study in applied consequence theory. Consequence theory, Grick's voice cracked slightly. The academic principle that actions generate proportional reactions within complex social systems. Your operational methods have produced negative consequences for approximately 237 individuals over the past decade. I'm conducting a practical examination of how those consequences might be systematically addressed. The tactical display showed the target vessel's engine signatures fluctuating. Someone aboard was apparently considering whether their ship's capabilities might overcome 17 coordinated opponents through superior desperation. I wouldn't recommend attempting escape, Zenth continued with the tone of someone offering friendly advice. The vessels currently maintaining containment formation include several with military-grade interception capabilities. More importantly, escape would necessitate transitioning to what my research indicates you would call Plan B operations. What's Plan B? Knox asked, with the sort of reluctant curiosity that suggested he probably didn't want to know the answer. Systematic dismantling of your entire operational infrastructure across 7 systems, followed by detailed intelligence sharing with law enforcement agencies, military organizations, and approximately 40 merchant guilds whose members have expressed interest in pursuing legal remedies for past grievances. The silence that followed suggested the pirates were processing the implications of having their backup plans thoroughly researched and preemptively countered by someone whose background involved studying geological formations rather than criminal psychology. Alternatively, Professor Zenth continued, we can proceed with the current field study, which involves significantly more direct and immediate resolution of outstanding issues. Captain Voss found himself developing a new appreciation for the thoroughness of academic research methods. Professor, what exactly does direct resolution entail? Single combat challenge, modified for interspecies physiological differences. Winner takes all. Loser accepts complete operational dissolution and voluntary exile from commercial shipping lanes. Reeves blinked. You're challenging 3 armed pirates to personal combat? Mounted at a time, naturally. Academic methodology emphasizes controlled experimental conditions. The communication array crackled with what sounded like frantic consultation among the pirates. After several minutes, Grix's voice returned, carrying the resigned tone of someone who'd finally understood that all available options led to the same general destination. Terms: standard academic debate format, single representative from each party, non-lethal weapons, conflict continues until one participant yields or becomes incapacitated. Winner determines final disposition of all involved parties. And if we refuse? Professor Zenth's reply carried the cheerful tone of someone discussing theoretical possibilities rather than immediate threats. Then we proceed with Plan B, and I spend the next several months conducting a much more comprehensive study of criminal network dismantling across multiple star systems. Your choice, gentlemen. The tactical display showed the containment formation tightening slightly, not enough to constitute an aggressive action, but sufficient to emphasize that academic patience had practical limitations. The Shelfman RVSS, Admiral Koreth of the Galactic Maritime Enforcement Division, maintained what his species considered a perfectly neutral expression while reviewing incident reports that would have given his predecessors severe indigestion. The Nexari's compound eyes processed multiple data streams simultaneously, which proved useful when trying to understand exactly how a geology professor had managed to restructure interstellar criminal law enforcement in the span of a single afternoon. Summarize the physical confrontation, he instructed his aide, Commander Thex, whose enthusiasm for bureaucratic precision had served the department well during less complicated cases. Duration: 4 minutes 37 seconds. Participants: Professor X Zenth versus Grix. Primary weapons limited to plasma staffs set to training intensity. Outcome: decisive victory for the academic, achieved through what our combat analysts describe as superior tactical preparation and unexpected psychological elements. The holographic replay showed the contest in unforgiving detail. What should have been a straightforward physical confrontation between a career criminal and a middle-aged academic had instead resembled a practical examination in applied leverage physics. Grix had possessed obvious advantages in reach, muscle mass, and combat experience, but Professor Zenth had approached the encounter with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent considerable time studying Zelkari anatomy, reaction patterns, and psychological vulnerability. The unusual aspect, Commander Thex continued with the tone of someone trying to maintain professional objectivity while describing fundamentally bizarre events, is that she appeared to be conducting educational commentary throughout the engagement. Educational commentary? Notice how overconfidence in reach advantage creates predictable attack patterns, Tex read from the transcript. The Zelkari tendency toward intimidation displays actually telegraphs commitment to specific strike zones. She was apparently teaching someone off-camera about combat theory while simultaneously demonstrating practical applications. Admiral Koreth's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement or concern. Teaching whom? Unknown. Audio analysis suggests multiple students, possibly via remote connection, academic networking protocols. The implications settled over the command center like an unwelcome atmospheric inversion. Somewhere in the galaxy, Professor Xenth had been conducting what amounted to graduate-level coursework in applied vengeance, while simultaneously executing the practical components of her curriculum. A casualty report, the Admiral requested, though his tone suggested he was bracing for complicated answers. 0 fatalities. 3 pirates accepted voluntary exile after waiving all rights to appeal, property claims, or future criminal enterprise licensing. Comprehensive intelligence regarding their network operations was transferred to appropriate enforcement agencies across 7 systems. Approximately 47 separate criminal investigations have been initiated based on the provided evidence. And Professor X? Commander Thex consulted his datapad with the expression of someone trying to solve an equation that refused to balance properly. Returned to her university position, filed standard insurance claims for medical expenses and equipment costs, submitted a research paper titled Practical Applications of Consequence Theory in Cross-Species Conflict Resolution to the Journal of Applied Xenopsychology. The Admiral's compound eyes focused on the final incident report with the intensity of someone trying to locate the logical flaw in an otherwise incomprehensible sequence of events. Her motivations? According to post-incident interviews, she wanted to ensure that similar thefts wouldn't occur in the future. The systematic dismantling of the Zelkari network was intended as what she termed preventive education for other criminal organizations. She destroyed an entire criminal network to prevent future robberies. Apparently, though destroyed may be inaccurate, our analysts suggest restructured is more precise. Several former pirates have applied for legitimate employment in cargo security. Others have enrolled in educational programs. The overall effect appears to be criminal rehabilitation rather than elimination. Admiral Korith reviewed the financial data, expecting to find evidence of massive resource expenditure that would explain how an academic had managed to coordinate military-level operations. Instead, he discovered something far more disturbing. The entire operation had been conducted within the budget constraints of a university research grant. How much did this cost her? Approximately 4,000 credits, not including medical expenses. Most participants in the containment operation volunteered their services after she provided them with evidence of how the Zelkari network had affected their business interests. The Admiral's understanding of criminal justice economics underwent rapid revision. Traditional law enforcement approaches to piracy involved extensive investigation periods, costly prosecution procedures, and uncertain outcomes. Professor Xenth had achieved superior results using academic networking, volunteer coordination, and what appeared to be remarkably efficient resource allocation. "Recommendation from the psychology division?" he asked. Though his tone suggested he wasn't confident, he wanted to hear their analysis. Commander Thex activated a secondary display showing the official assessment from the department's behavioral specialists. Quote, "Subject demonstrates classic human problem-solving methodology, comprehensive research phase followed by systematic implementation of optimal solutions. Psychological profile indicates no abnormal aggressive tendencies, merely efficient application of available resources toward clearly defined objectives." Recalling systematic criminal network dismantling, efficient resource application. The psychology division notes that from Professor Xenth's perspective, she was solving a logistics problem. How to prevent future theft of irreplaceable research materials while operating within academic budget constraints and university ethical guidelines. Admiral Korith found himself confronting the unsettling realization that galactic law enforcement might need to reconsider its fundamental assumptions about conflict resolution, resource allocation, and the relationship between academic methodology and practical problem-solving. Current status of similar incidents. 17 separate cases under review. Apparently, Professor Zenth's research paper has generated considerable academic interest. Several universities are developing coursework in applied consequent studies based on her findings. The Admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a stress response that had developed during his decades of dealing with interstellar criminal organizations, but which had never been triggered by academic research publications. Are you telling me that universities are teaching courses in systematic criminal network dismantling? Not exactly. They're teaching efficient problem-solving methodologies that happen to have practical applications in conflict resolution scenarios. The fact that these methodologies prove effective against criminal organizations appears to be an unintended secondary benefit. Admiral Koreth reviewed the incident timeline one final time, trying to identify the point where routine piracy had transformed into a case study that would probably reshape galactic law enforcement training protocols. The answer, he realized, lay not in the dramatic confrontation or systematic network dismantling, but in the initial moment when 3 career criminals had made the mistake of assuming that academic research was inherently harmless. Final assessment, he instructed. Commander Thex consulted his analysis summary with the expression of someone trying to explain quantum mechanics to a particularly skeptical audience. Professor Zenth appears to have approached personal victimization as a research problem requiring systematic solution. Her methods were unconventional but effective. Her resource utilization was remarkably efficient, and her results exceeded traditional law enforcement outcomes by significant margins. And the broader implications? Sir, if human academics routinely apply this level of methodical problem-solving to personal conflicts, we may need to reconsider our assumptions about the relationship between education and public safety. Admiral Koreth deactivated the holographic displays and contemplated a future in which university professors represented a significant factor in criminal justice calculations. Somewhere in the galaxy, geology courses were probably being supplemented with optional modules in tactical planning. Psychology students were learning about practical applications of intimidation theory, and academic conferences were generating networking opportunities that criminal organizations would find deeply concerning. The irony wasn't lost on him. The galaxy's most efficient anti-piracy operation had been conducted by someone whose primary interest lay in understanding how rocks formed under extreme pressure. Perhaps, he reflected, there were more similarities between geological processes and criminal justice than anyone had previously realized. Both, after all, involved the systematic application of pressure until fundamental structural changes occurred.